Welcome to our special series on the James Bond films, the 007 Briefings. I'm Intelligence Officer Wiz, and with me is my Weapons Officer. Introduce yourself.
Zero,
welcome back. See, I'm glad that we were able to...
prodigal son has returned.
I know, right? I am so glad we were able to tell everyone what your true job is. And the true job is that you're the Weapons Officer on a special branch of MI6, which you may not have known about. We keep that secret here. We're here today to discuss the various exploits and adventures of one James Bond, codenamed 007. And we're going to start with his first mission today, and that is what, Zero?
Dr. No.
Dr. No. Zero, before we get started, why don't you clue us in on what is your experience with the Bond films?
I've pretty much watched most of the Bond films. There are a few of the older ones that I have not watched, but when I was a kid, my dad really loved the Bond films. It was just one of the things that he would just go, "All right, boy, I've got the new Bond film from the rental shop, so we're going to watch it." And it's like, "Okay, Dad."
What's a honey rider? It's like, you'll find out later, son. I got started with Bond around when Brosnan was Bond, in around the 90s. And I gotta be quite honest, I didn't get the appeal. Like right away, I was like, okay, I guess this is kind of corny, and there's a lot of hot women. That's cool, I guess. But I'll be honest with you, I didn't really get into Bond until the Craig series, when Daniel Craig was Bond. Then I was like, whoa, what is this? And that's where I was like, okay, then I got to go back to all the Bonds. And I went through a number of them. Dr. No is one I've already went through, but we're going to start from the beginning. So why don't we just get started with our mission objectives? Zero, when we are reviewing these movies, we're going to review them based on specific elements of the Bond films. James Bond films has a lot of different formulas and different things that they do in the films or that are very similar. So we're just going to go by different categories. And that is how was Bond, how is the villain, the Bond girl, the action, spycraft, sex appeal, which will be interesting, and the theme song, which every one of them has a theme song. So why don't we get started, Zero? We're going to get started with the first thing, which is what we think of Bond. Of course, James Bond is played by Sean Connery in Dr. No. He is considered by many to be the best Bond because he was the first and he was the one that started it all. Tell me, what are your thoughts of seeing Sean Connery in the role for the first time?
He's kind of a man's man. He is classy, debonair, and he is also very, very witty.
I was a little surprised in this movie because the thing with Connery that I hear more from people who like James Bond films is he's rugged, he's rough, he's a violent person, but he's also suave and sophisticated. He's this ultimate mix of different types of men, either the classy gentleman or the rugged individualist who will take things into his own hands. But in this movie, he's more, I guess, classy in this way. He's not as much of a violent thug as he would be in most films. Just kind of surprising. So you definitely see in this film why Bond has to be so charming, because Connery was very charming in this movie. I think that's the biggest thing about him that I want to get across is the number one thing about Bond is that he is charming as hell, especially Connery in this role. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards him as the best Bond, because he's easily the most likable, even though he does, some questionable things. A couple questions that I have then. Did the Scottish accent bother you?
Not really. If anything, I thought it was kind of charming and everything, because especially with the opening scene where you just kind of see him in kind of a French gambling parlor playing Baccarat, I was just like, yep. Classy Sean Connery there.
Oh, yeah. Like, and it's interesting seeing him and then seeing what he became later on, which is this rough, rugged, kind of just like a almost ordinary old man. Like, it's really interesting to see those two apart from each other. The classiness, I think, is what sticks out here. I will say, though, when he becomes violent, when he does the hand-to-hand fighting, I don't buy it as much. I think this is more of a thing of the time because the fight choreography wasn't that great back then. But when he beats up people and everything like that, like that's where I'm like, this is not so good.
Unfortunately, the fight choreography looked kind of corny and hokey. Best way I can describe it is it just looked like the fight choreography in Star Trek, the original series. It just didn't look very convincing.
I get that fight choreography is essentially memorizing steps. You got to do this, punch here, kick there. I get that. But the art of choreography doing really well is that it flows really nicely to where it seems natural. It seems like they were just going, okay, left foot, right fist to sternum, left to face. This guy moves this way. And it was just very choreographed to where it's obvious. It was like dancing almost. And it just didn't really work when it came to those fight sequences. But you do buy that he will kill you in an instant. That I will say, correct?
Oh yeah, especially like when he does the really clever setups and stuff where he ambushes somebody. Mm-hmm. It's basically I know you fucked up and you're probably gonna die sort of a vibe.
Yeah. Like, another thing that they show Bond in that a lot of films until later didn't do is his cleverness, is his intelligence, because they would just rely on charm, likability, and suaveness to actually get him to do certain things in the film, whereas this shows that he is fully capable intellectually of doing things. So that was definitely something that I really liked about Bond in this one. And again, I definitely see clearly as to why people prefer Connery in this. But for right now, I think the fighting is what needs work. Or that's more of a sign of the times, I think.
And I think really just more heavy focus on the spycraft part.
Yeah.
Really is just a product of the fact that this really has a feeling that it really just treated the novel of the same name as the utmost Bible to build this movie upon. And as a person who's read pretty much a lot of the Bond novels, kind of love Dr. No for just being very respectful to the novel.
That's interesting. I didn't know that you read the novels.
Oh yeah, it was something that I loved reading as a kid. Just I would always love going to the school library or the public library and just find a copy of one of the Bond books and just read through them cover to cover.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I did not know that, but that's cool as hell. So yeah, so it's faithful to how they portrayed Bond as well?
Oh yeah, because in the novel there's just a lot of spycraft, a lot of really stealthy espionage and things like that, and Bond is definitely not a thug in the novel. So just it sort of matches up with Connery's portrayal of Bond in the Dr. No movie, and it was just one of those things that I remember when I had first watched Dr. No, I was like, oh man, this is fantastic. This just lines up with the book.
Okay, well, that's cool. Okay. And I guess the other thing that I buy, too, is the womanizing side of Bond with Connery. Connery plays Bond very effortlessly. It's not like, he doesn't seem like he's acting. He's like, this is just who the fuck I am. Oh, come here, baby. Like, okay. Like, and you buy it, too. Like, you definitely buy it with Connery in this one, whereas I would say with other Bonds, not as much. But you definitely see why the women like him in this movie. Like a lot of movies that try this as well, where the man's a womanizer, he always sleeps with women. They just like presuppose it. It's like, well, he is because he is. Okay, but why would a woman want to? But this movie does a great job of showing, oh, here's the reason why. That guy's a smooth motherfucker. That's why. And it works, and he works very well in that. Like Connery is very good as Bond in this. But the only thing I would change is the hand-to-hand fighting, essentially. He doesn't even use his gun that much in this movie, correct? Like, I think once is when he'd used it.
Yeah, once when he actually used it to take down somebody, but yeah, just there are a few scenes where he'll threaten to shoot somebody with a gun, but yeah, he never actually fires. But a lot of the combat scenes in this movie were just mostly hand-to-hand.
Yeah. So let's get into the villain, which is Dr. Julius No, played by Joseph Wiseman. Dr. No is not much of a character in this movie. He is definitely somebody who I would say is a background character, but he is the person that sets everything up, essentially. You don't see Dr. No until, let's say, the last 30 minutes of the film. And let me just say this real quick. I saw Austin Powers before I ever watched Dr. No. And the first time I watched Dr. No, I was like, oh, that's where they got Austin Powers from. The base, the clothing. Like, I was like, because I love Austin Powers. I think it's hilarious. But when I watched him, it's like, where are they getting this shit from? But when I saw Dr. No, I was like, oh, okay. Like the way Dr. Evil is compared to Dr. No, they're very similar. My issue, maybe is because I saw Dr. Evil first, is that Dr. No seems pretty goofy for a villain. With the gloves and the stiffness. Like, he doesn't seem intimidating. He just looks odd. And maybe it's his oddness that makes him such a dangerous person, but it just doesn't come off that way. It comes off more cheesy than anything else.
Unfortunately, I think this is where the portrayal of Dr. No is a little bit weaker than it is in the novel, mostly because just in this movie, he just kind of seems to be like the planning and scheming overlord rather than just kind of an active participating villain, especially like in a few scenes where some of the assassination attempts on Bond fail, and one of the henchmen is like, yeah, so we failed, and then he's just like, no, you failed, get the job done, or else.
I think one of the weaker elements of this film is the villain, Dr. No. And it's just because I don't think he's really that effective or doesn't feel that threatening. When you make a villain that way, when you make him where he's a background character, and then when you meet him, the first thing you want to feel is, oh man, this guy is scary. But when he looks the way he looks and acts the way he acts, it's kind of like, who is this fucking goofball? Does Dr. No die at the end of the book?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. My feeling at the end was it probably would have been better if Dr. No was never seen in this movie. He was just always that background character and you killed one of his lackeys and then that was it. But then I guess if he was killed in the book, then I guess it makes sense why they did it this way. I just don't think he was that good of a villain at all. Like, even when he was just a background character, it just didn't feel like that much of a threat. But then again, the appeal of this movie was Bond, so I guess that's not such a bad thing.
In the movie, Dr. No sort of kind of hints towards it, but he doesn't actually sort of say it outright that he lost his hands in sort of a freak accident. The novel makes it very apparent that due to just his work with radioactive materials, it basically just deteriorated his hands, and that's why he's got very stiff prosthetic hands.
Yeah.
So it was kind of one of those things I was just like, wow, that's not really a great way to explain why he's got real stiff hands when it's just kind of an implied, yeah, I work a lot with radiation and my hands are the result of that. It's just like, if you weren't paying attention, you probably completely missed that.
Yeah, I kind of missed it too. I noticed that he had a problem with his hands, but the way they made it look was really goofy. That's the big thing, the big problem I have with Dr. No as a character. He's just not threatening. He's just goofy. This might also be colored by the fact that I love the first Austin Powers, but every time I thought of him, I just thought of Dr. Evil. That might be my issue, but I just felt he was completely ineffective as a villain in this.
It's kind of a weird thing because as far as him as a Bond villain goes, he's oddly very, very hospitable. Because like when Bond gets captured, he kind of rolls out the red carpet for me. He's just like, yeah, you're covered in radiation. My people will get you scrubbed down and all that, and then they get taken to kind of a nice plush prison. I mean, it's still a prison, but I mean it's well furnished with a nice bed and everything. And then I'd like you to sit for dinner with me and let us talk about you joining our very, very secret organization.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of one of those things you're just like, wow, for a villain, he's awful hospitable.
Yeah. That's what the whole joke is with Bond films, where the villain just doesn't outright kill him right away. He does this long dialogue or this really drawn-out torture sequence that he gets to get away from. Like, that's kind of like the whole shtick that other Bond films tend to do. It starts with Dr. No, but I don't see why it needed to. It just is a very weird kind of angle they went to in this word. So he's probably one of the weaker elements of the film. So I didn't like him as the villain. All right, so let's get into the next segment, which is the Bond girl, which is Honey Rider, played by Ursula Andress. Talking about Bond girls is a little weird, because what is the purpose of a Bond? Is it to drive a certain plot element, to be a romantic interest? Is it eye candy? You don't meet Honey Rider until the second half of the film, and she is very childlike, and to an annoying degree. The one thing that really stuck out throughout the entire film is how everybody in the film, except for maybe Felix, just seems to be less intelligent. But here's Bond taking care of everything. He knows more. You would think that the people who live on the island would know a lot more about what's going on. But they talk about a dragon that lives on the island. Now, me and you and anybody would be like, there's not really a dragon there. And of course, Bond feels the same way. But the fact that not only do most of the locals feel this way, but also Honey Rider as well, even though she's on the damn island, is just like, wait, what? In the book, how is Honey Rider like?
That I can't remember offhand because just she's kind of described as that almost makes it seem like she's supposed to be eye candy in the mind's eye and everything. And that was why I was like, just. And I'd read this read Dr. No when I was real young, so it was like, girls, gross.
Oh, yeah. We were all there at one point. Let me tell you what I feel like in the movie that she's supposed to be. She's supposed to be a damsel, and that's it. There are other Bond movies that use the Bond girl trope very well to make them more interesting, but she's eye candy and she's a damsel in distress. That is it. Really good looking eye candy. Ursula Andress is very, very beautiful, but she's not given much to work with. And on top of that, it's kind of annoying. Like, to me, she was pretty annoying. The way she talked, the way she acted, maybe not much the way she talked, but more the way she acted, really, just was kind of grating. This might be the weakest element of the film, which is Honey Rider, but she's only in it throughout like half the film, and that's it. To me, it was like, why was she there? But I think we all know why she's there, to be completely honest.
Her role is very small, and she doesn't have any clever bits to her personality. Like, she's not a super spy, she's not a scientist, or any of kind of like the interesting roles that some of the Bond girls that come later in later movies have. Yeah. Where they're intelligent, they're cunning, they're absolutely fatal, just all sorts of interesting tropes. And just with Honey Rider, it's just kind of a, hey, yeah, she's there, she's a pretty girl, and runs into Bond by happenstance. And because now she's involved with Bond, just bad shit happens.
And then the romance that happens is just kind of like, why? I was like, why is there a romantic element to this? Like, okay, whatever, fine. It's like, it seems like the romantic element was just, we just need to see Bond get laid again, and that was it. And there we go. They're on the boat, and they are doing their thing, and that is it. Probably the weakest element of the film. Let's get to the action. There's not much action in this movie. Would you agree with that? There's like one time where a gun is used, and there is a car chase scene, and then there is a fight. And that's really it. The rest of it is just spycraft.
Unfortunately, the car scenes are a little bit weird because I know it was an older film technique and everything, but in some of the car chase scenes, it'll transition from like an actual recorded car chase scene, and then it'll be Bond with a green screen behind.
Yeah.
And it just looks so bad in modern context. But I mean, I imagine back when this movie came out, it was probably like, oh my god, these scenes are amazing.
I don't know about that. They were doing those types of projection scenes from the 30s, I would say. I remember It Happened One Night had a scene like that. It was just cheaper to make them that way. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it is a thing of its time, but looking back at it, it is kind of corny in a way. So the driving sequences are not great. We talked about the hand-to-hand sequences. They're not good either. Gunplay isn't used all that much. But again, I think it's unfortunate, but action didn't really become a big thing with Bond until I would say later on. Probably maybe not the next movie we're going to watch, but probably with Goldfinger. I guess it's not too much of a surprise, but I guess because of how Bond films are made nowadays, they're very heavy on the action. The last couple of Bond films had very extravagant action sequences set in like beautiful locales and done with huge space. So I guess to find that this movie doesn't have much at all is interesting, but weird. It's passable, but it's not the main focus, which I think is a good thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. I just completely love the spycraft in here.
Yes.
No complex gadgets, just clever, cunning, and just wit for a lot of the spycraft scenes. This is what I know Bond from the novels for. He's a smart guy, he's very clever, he's very witty, and when he has to be ruthless, he is also very cunning. He will set traps up for people he's trying to get and interrogate. And for me, that's just what I love about the classic Bond novels, because of the fact that it doesn't go heavy into the gadgets and the techno-wizardry towards the later movies as well, too, like with the Pierce Brosnan movies. To see and remember Dr. No, again, made me I just remember, oh man, just this was what early Bond was about. Just pure spycraft and cunning. Love to see it.
Oh, yeah. The best thing that this movie does is it sets up and then it executes. A lot of spy movies nowadays, they don't really like to do setup all that much. But what they will do is they do the execution, where it's like, oh, surprise, the villains didn't get him anyway. And then they'll double back and go, and this is what the guy did. What Dr. No does very well in this is it'll have Bond do curious things. It's really cool that they show the setup in this for a lot of these sequences. But when they arrested the one girl that Bond slept with for being a spy to Dr. No, what they showed him next doing is making the bed a certain way and then sitting on the chair. Bond films nowadays, they would just iris out and then they would have somebody coming in with a gun shooting the bed, and then Bond out of nowhere is like, haha, I found you. I'm like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be dead. It's like, haha, I knew you were going to do this. I'm like, oh, okay. Dr. No is better with this way because it shows him saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And you're looking at it going, what is he doing? Like, why is he doing this? And then once the scene executes, oh, I get, that's clever. That's clever. That was a very interesting thing to see in this, where I think Bond films now don't really do that all that much. In this film, they do the spycraft very well. The other thing they do very well is procuring information, talking to specific people, finding elements of clues or anything, which is another thing that the later Bond films kind of de-emphasize. I agree with you. The spycraft in this movie is excellent. It's probably the best part of this film.
And funny enough, the spycraft came back for a little bit during the Craig saga for Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace. And despite people absolutely reviling Quantum of Solace, it's actually one of my beloved Craig movies, mostly because it's a revenge short story. And to see it being given a full screen treatment was super interesting. It goes very heavy into the spycraft stuff as well. So for the Bond saga, those two are probably by far my favorites, mostly because they seem very respectful to the original novels, but it's updated to a more contemporary setting.
I know they were books, but I didn't really know if they just deviated away from the books at some point. But I think I read somewhere they're still making the books. It's just that they are authorized by the company that owns Ian Fleming's work. Is that correct?
Yeah, they are. I haven't been able to catch up for some of the stuff that's been released in the last decade and a half, unfortunately. But writing, if I remember correctly, is more stylized towards how the movies are basically composed now. So for anyone who's read some of the original Bond novels like me, it sounds like that they would be very disappointing, which is a damn shame.
We both love the spycraft, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's no question.
Great, absolutely. Let's get into a subject that's going to be kind of weird. The sex appeal. Let's be honest. Bond has sex appeal. Whether it is Bond himself or the Bond girls or the women that he has his trysts with. One of the key elements of a Bond film is sex appeal, is sexiness. Dr. No establishes right away that Bond is a coxman of sorts. He is somebody that derives pleasure from sleeping with as many women as possible. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's sort of, I guess, a tool of his spycraft box on trying to get information on a person he's trying to track or to find out more information. That person's significant other may be working with someone related to his target and things like that.
Sure.
It definitely seems like just a tool to get the information that he needs. I think the first woman from the Baccarat Hall, that was more just for fun. It was just like, hey, I gotta leave. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, but then the spy in the embassy thing, I think that also was kind of like a just for fun thing, because he already knew that she was a spy, but he was like, oh, I'll nail her anyway, and then once we're done, okay, off with you. I was like, okay. Like, honestly, the women that he slept with, I don't think really had much to do with information at all, do they? If we really think about it. But we're the three. It would be the woman from the beginning, the spy, and then Honey Ryder, and that's it. Like, none of them had any kind of information. But you're right. In a lot of the films later on, there would be, like, second-hand men from the criminal syndicate or target that she had to get information from that led to another target. To be honest here, he's charming enough where he doesn't need to do that, but He wants to. Like, let's be fair. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think the spy from the embassy, that was more just a, oh, I know she's plotting something, but I'm just gonna burn some time off just to see where this goes.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was. The women establish one thing in this movie, that they are gorgeous and classy. All the women, all the people in this film are fucking gorgeous. But I think the classiness is also a thing that we have to discuss as well, because all the women, as gorgeous as they are wearing really stylish, very good-looking clothing. They fit incredibly well, like utterly gorgeous looking at all times. Especially even Bond too. Even like Felix in this movie as well are wearing fairly expensive for the time or fairly classy and stylish looking clothing. And that's a template that they go through throughout the Bond series. What it shows right away is the type of women that are these movies and what become Bond girls or targets of Bond's lustly desires, I would say. What would you think?
I'd probably be inclined to agree. This movie definitely, there wasn't really much of an element of him just using the women just for information or things like that. They're merely just conquests in this movie. Yeah, as far as the women that are featured in the movie, just they're kind of gorgeous in an old-fashioned way. And I mean, that's not a bad thing. I imagine it probably helped the movie do well with the male audience.
Oh, God. Yeah, like this movie's gonna have a problem with the male audience. Like, it's an action film with car chases and spy elements. Gee, we need the male audience. What else do we need for this spy thriller? It's like it's a little extra on top, but it works for the movie, absolutely. You're familiar with the other Bond films as they later go on. They don't stray from this formula. You don't see, like, the prototypical, like, she's all that, oh, she's a clumsy nerd who dresses messy, who just so happens to be hot. No, they all are incredibly attractive, but also dress really well. That has never strayed from the formula at all at any point. Someone's going to point out one, and I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, true. But for the most part, I don't think it's ever strayed there. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's get into the final element, which is the theme song. And the theme song is the Dr. No theme song written by Monty Norman and performed by John Barry and his orchestra. This has become the theme song for Bond. It's on every Bond film. It's a great theme song. It works for what it is. The way that they did that is exciting, classy.
Oh, yeah, just the moment you hear it, it's just oh so iconic now, especially for me who has watched most of the Bond movies. I still remember the first time when I'd watched Dr. No, and that was really the first Bond movie I watched with my dad. My God, when the theme comes on, you're just like, oh man, this is gonna be good.
Yeah, it is such a good theme song. And I, for one, am happy that they decided to do other theme songs. Like, they have a theme song in every Bond that's new. But I like that they incorporate this song in a Bond film, every Bond. I think there may be one Craig film where they don't do it, but I might be wrong. This is such an iconic theme song that it should be in there, and it works really well as a theme song to this movie, and I'm glad they keep incorporating it in other Bond films. So, yeah, great theme song. There's not much else to say about it.
On the subject of music, I do think the use of musical themes during certain scenes is just absolutely fantastic. My favorite scene is just the tarantula attack scene at the hotel, when you have like the dramatic effect of just Bond just jumping out of bed, just trying to throw the tarantula off his body onto the floor, and then you just see him take his shoe and just slap the shit out of this tarantula to death. And you've got like the orchestra and the horns just like being real bold and just striking staccato notes every time he slaps the ground. You're just like, God damn, the music choreography is so good.
Yeah, the emphasis on the slapping is really good. I agree with you on that one. Okay, so why don't we get into our conclusions? Zero, what is your conclusion on Dr. No?
It's a great movie if you kind of enjoy a spy thriller movie that's more heavily focused on the spycraft. Those who are more into the action-y style Bond movies might come off disappointed because probably going to look at it and go, wow, there's not really that much action. And that's just not what the focus of the old Bond movies are. They're really more heavily focused on the spycraft. So if you appreciate the spycraft end of the movies, then definitely give this one a watch. I think it's still worth most people's time, even with some of the antiquated things like the car chase scenes and the fight choreography.
I agree with you. I think the spycraft is really good in this movie. This is a blueprint for better things to come. So the fact that this film started a lot of the elements that is Bond now, the clothes, the way Bond is, the Bond girls, the use of spycraft in action. The fact that this is the blueprint and it's still strong to this day is actually really good, because a lot of films that try to make into franchises, they don't go as good as the first one. But Dr. No is a very good movie. It's fun, it's enjoyable, but it is still definitely a blueprint as to what Bond becomes later on down the road. I mean, the weaknesses, I think, are due more to the time period and how films were made, with, I would say, the exception of Honey Rider. Like, I think the Honey Rider character just is not good. It probably...
Yeah, Honey Rider's unfortunately a bit on the weekend for the Bond girls throughout the Bond girl history and everything, but
yeah,
it was the first film, so, I mean, it's something that they do eventually sort out towards the later movies, but, yeah, I think that's another good weak point to mention as well.
Yeah. But she is so iconic because of her look, though. Like, she has the look, absolutely. But it's just that the character itself is just not much of anything. Normally, I would say this is a fault of the actress, but I just don't think the film wrote her anything that much. I get why she is iconic, because of the look and how she is when you first meet her in the film. Like, the photo of her with the white bikini and the holstered knife is iconic in itself. There were posters of her until, like, the 80s and 90s, how popular she was. But in the end, though, like, the character itself is not very good. So, but I think this is a good film. But it showcases the strengths of Bond and what is to come later on down the road. So I agree with you. The spycraft is great, but a good movie in itself. So, Zero, mission accomplished?
Oh, yeah, mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished, Mr. Bond. Great job on Dr. No. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. So, we are at the end of this episode, and we're going to talk about the next Bond mission that we're going to be discussing. It's going to be his Soviet campaign from what film, Zero?
From Russia with Love.
Yes, From Russia with Love. Another one directed by Terrence Young and starring Sean Connery. If I recall correctly, this film takes what Dr. No did and ratchets it up a few. I think this is one of the first films where it's more of a cross-country film, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So tune in next time where me and Zero go over From Russia with Love. I am The Wiz.
And I'm Zero.
Talk to you next time, guys. Bye.